today in Rich in Relationship. We're going to talk about why it's vital to have a family charter, just like you would for a business. Family is based on belonging. It's based on safety. It's based on caring. It's based on unconditional love. Business is built on results. It's built on accountability. It's built on performance. And when those collide, or when they get mixed up together, the sense of safety starts to dissipate. Welcome to another episode of Rich in Relationship. I'm your host, Rich Heller, and today we're talking about family charter versus, this is different than a business mission. A family charter is something really different. And a family charter is kind of building on an idea that we put out in the last episode of having a relationship governance, or let's call it a procedures manual. And the fact of the matter is that successful businesses have clear vision, mission, values, policies, procedures, and the reason why is it helps them to stay focused and successful. So why not your family, right? That's what we're putting out here. And this is actually not a new idea. I didn't invent it. Lots of families have this. The most successful families have this. Families that have mad financial freedom have this. Go look at the history of, the Kennedys or the Bushes even. These are families that are creating dynasties. And why? Because they have shared vision, mission, values, a sense of purpose, a long-term plan. Now, I'm not saying you need to be like that long-term, but having some kind of plan for where you're gonna be when you're 90, assuming you live that long, wouldn't hurt. And what's your role gonna be? And what's gonna happen with your kids and their kids and their kids' kids? Having some idea of the legacy you're leaving behind can't hurt. And that's all wrapped up in this idea of a family charter. One listener writes, "My partner and I run a business together, and lately I feel like everything blends together. Work conversations turn into personal arguments, family time gets interrupted by business stress, and sometimes I don't even know if we're making decisions as business partners or as a family. How do I separate this without failing?" And I want you to know that my wife and I have worked together and we've worked apart. And even when we work apart, work conversations often dominate and interfere with our family conversations, displace our family conversations, right? So this isn't just true for entrepreneurs. It's true for anyone who's doing their best to generate income to move their family forward, because inevitably we come home and we talk about what's going on at work, inevitably. And when you work together, you talk about it even more. This problem of blurred roles, of constant tension, of no clear boundary between business and personal life happens to families of all kinds, but particularly to couples who are entrepreneurs, to co-preneurs. Basically, this is what happens when maybe you have some governance or a procedures manual for how to make decisions, but you haven't got a clear charter, a clear vision, mission, values for your family. So if you've been tracking Brad and Gwen, are true but not real examples of this. They had implemented governance that we talked about in the last episode. That means that they had a procedure for who was responsible for what. They had a procedure for how each individual was going to make decisions and how they were going to make decisions when there was no procedure, and what the guidelines would be for what to do when things didn't go as planned, or when a procedure didn't fit, or when the situation didn't fit the procedure. They had a pretty good idea of what that was. They were communicating weekly. They were making clearer decisions. They had less chaos, but they had a new problem. See, Brad and Gwen actually worked together, and you don't have to work together to have this problem, but this is the problem that they had. Their business was growing. You see, as they got into a greater harmony and alignment and brought that to work, they started succeeding more at work. That's what happens when you have clear roles and responsibilities and you live by them. With that growth, there was more pressure. The roles that they had identified in the past were being redefined by the new demands of the larger business. There was more pressure, there were more decisions, there was more at stake. And slowly, business started to dominate everything. A conversation about marketing turned into, at home, a critique of how much effort they were making. A financial discussion became a question of trust. A missed deadline became a personal disappointment. They were taking work and personalizing it. And I've worked with couples where there's one primary wage earner where this has happened, where he gets a setback at work and suddenly they don't have the money that they need and he gets criticized at home for it because she's dependent on him. Or I've seen it the other way, where she is the prime wage earner and he has a hobby business. And suddenly he can't afford his hobby business anymore. They need to cut back. And he's really upset. And she says, well, why don't you go get a job? This can be a source of friction, whether you work together or not. Gwen said, I don't know if I'm talking to my husband or my business partner. Brad said, I feel like I can't win no matter what role I take on. In fact, most of the time, I feel like I'm an employee, being hung out to dry. They didn't lack structure anymore. They lacked separation of structure. Or a better way to put it would be, the structure at work was coming home and they didn't have a structure at home. We introduced a distinction to them because the reality is, right, we said in the previous episode, first we charge our own batteries, then we charge our partnership, then we charge our family, then we charge our business. But when business becomes all-encompassing and starts sucking the life out of everything else, it's because we haven't got a clear charter or a guideline or vision or mission, or maybe our vision, mission, and values have shifted at home and we haven't articulated it clearly. So what is a family charter? I keep saying family charter, family charter, family charter, family charter. A family charter defines values. And a lot of couples fight over values. They think they don't have the same values, but actually, very often, it's that they have the same values, but they're not in the same priority. One has value at the top, the other has financial success at the top. The one who has family values at the top has financial success third. The one who has financial success third has family values second. And so when couples have not the same priorities, even though they share the same values, there's conflict. A family charter defines how we treat one another, right? A family charter that works might sound like this. Even when we disagree, we will treat each other with courtesy, kindness, respect, and maybe even love. That would be a form of family charter. Do people keep to charters perfectly? Probably not. But when you have something to reach for, at least you know when you're out of alignment with it. Family charters define what's most important besides worldly success. We're going to call it achievement. Achievement. Achievement is, there's a flow that the world has around money and material. Achievement is defined a certain way by the world. Family charters define something bigger and broader than that. We've done multiple episodes on prosperity being so much more than material wealth. So a business mission defines goals, it defines strategy, it defines roles, performance expectations. It's an execution engine. Instead of blending a business mission, and you individually might have a mission in the business you're working in, even if it's not your own, instead of blending your business mission with your family charter, we want to get really clear that business serves family. Family does not absorb the stress of the business, if at all possible. right? Family does not serve business. If you're working for a corporation, your family does not suffer because you are serving the corporation. If the two of you are working together in a business, your family should not suffer because you're working in the business. There may be pain. There's a saying, pain is inevitable, suffering is optional. Suffering is when we haven't resolved the pain and it goes on and on and on and on. Pain is an indication that something needs to change. Suffering is the result of refusing to change. You know, I've talked to a lot of couples who have worked together, and one of the underlying beliefs is the beauty of working together is we're always hanging out together. We always get to be aligned. But the reality is when we don't separate family from work and they become one mishmash, performance becomes an identity. Feedback can feel like rejection. It can feel very personal. Stress has nowhere to go. The system becomes overloaded and emotionally volatile. The system becomes overloaded and emotionally volatile. Volatile. You caught that, right? My wife and I were out to dinner with a couple last night. We really like new people in our lives. Very successful. They have like 6 businesses and 3 not-for-profits. And they work together in all of them, and they live separately. I asked them, what's the secret of your success? And they said, Rich, we keep a massive separation between work and home, family. We rarely, if ever, bring work home, and we don't do work when we're doing family, and we don't do family when we're doing work. In fact, they told me this story of how one of their mothers came to the office and heard them talking to each other, and afterwards said, are you guys getting divorced? And they said, what do you mean? She said, the way you talk to each other. Because they talk to each other very military, sharp, getting the job done, very little emotionality. And they said, no, we're at work. Right? When we're at work, we're on a different mission. When we're at home, we're loving and affectionate with each other. They're very separate. And the reason why they do that is family is based on belonging. It's based on safety. It's based on caring. It's based on unconditional love. Business is built on results. It's built on accountability. It's built on performance. And when those collide, or when they get mixed up together, the sense of safety starts to dissipate. Imagine if that couple went home and talked to each other like they did at business. Did you empty the dishwasher? Good. Great. Oh, is the car clean? Good. Okay. Oh, should we have sex? All right, let's go have sex. I mean, it just wouldn't work. So what we did with Brad and Gwen is we helped them create a family charter. And part of that was, who are we as a family? What are our values? What are our strengths, our weaknesses? How do they apply here in the family? What matters most? Regardless, like if we lost everything and we were living in the shelter system, what would be most important? How do we treat each other under stress? If we were mad successful, what are the lessons we'd still want our children to learn? Do we want them to grow up with silver spoons, or do we want them to know how to scrape and scrap the way we did? And how will we set it up so that they can do that without being over-controlling, bullying jerks? I had another word for that. Business mission, separate. Family charter, separate. Or if you're not in business together, who you are at work can be very different than who you are at home. And as we talked about in previous episodes, it's super important to have your roles and responsibilities clear, to have decision authority in different areas for each of you, to have measurable outcomes. And when you have that, really, in both locations, feedback can exist without becoming personal. Here are some suggestions we gave Brad and Gwen that worked. When you're going to talk about business, even if you're going to do it at home, limit it to certain places. For example, never talk about business at the dinner table. Maybe in the living room. Avoid the bedroom if possible, but let's be honest, sometimes when we feel really safe and let our hair down in the bedroom, things just come out. We try to help them establish areas. Just like there were no phone areas, there were no business areas. There were places where family conversations happened. There were places where business conversation happened. There are no business conversations during protected family time. And at work, let's save our focus for getting things done and try to keep emotionality from home out of it, right? Let's not bring the problems of home to work. Just like they had regular caring conversation for their home, family life, marriage life, procedures, governance, they had regular conversations about business, and they had regular conversations about their family charter. How are we doing with our charter? Are there things that we need to change in our charter? They kept both systems separate and in balance. Now, I'm going to emphasize this again. Even if you're not in business together, you want a family charter. The more clarity you have about the principles that you're going to guide your family forward through, the more you're in alignment about this, the less likely you are to feel that those rules, values, principles are being violated. When we don't talk about it, that's when we get caught off guard. When we do talk about it, when we have clarity, when we write it out, that's when things fall into alignment. When we don't separate these things, everything can feel personal, tension escalates quickly, safety erodes. When there's distinction and alignment, clarity increases, communication improves, partnership strengthens. See, you don't need to choose between love and success, but you do need to choose between structure and chaos. Love does not ensure success. Structure does not ensure love. But love without structure does ensure chaos, and structure without love really ensures failure. So you need all of those pieces in your family. In your business, structure without love might mean success. Depends on the kind of business you're in. Even with strong governance and clear structure, there's one thing most couples still don't do. They don't step out of the system to reflect on it. Right? There's a saying in the business world, you can't just work in the business, you need to work on the business. And the same is true for marriage and relationships. And if you're working together and married, it becomes doubly true. So the next episode is about why retreats save partnerships before they break. Thank you for listening. If you like what you're hearing, like us, subscribe, reshare these episodes, help us start this movement that's going to save marriages across the country and maybe around the world. Help Rich in Relationship to save at least 10,000 marriages in the next 10 years, if not more. Help Rich in Relationship to empower co-preneurs to succeed and change the fabric of their businesses and their families. In the meantime, have an amazing day and a fantastic tomorrow.